y'all want to return the power?
I moved out there.
Are they going to move it?
No. The engine, 20 years ago.
But in 1917, Russia had the revolution, and most of these union orders were canceled. Normally, this would not have been a problem, but Russian railways in 1917 ran on rails that were 5 feet apart. In the United States, they're 4 feet, 8.5 inches. So you can't shrink a locomotive like this. So they went to a method that some people use on their automobiles. They put larger tires on it. Just believe it or not, especially with drive wheels in the locomotive, it's just like an automobile. You have the center rim and the outer tire. Just with a railroad, the outer tire is so they were able to put slightly wider tires on the locomotive and allow it to run in the United States. This railroad operated this particular Detroit, Toledo, and Ironton Railroad. Eventually led to the Seaboard Airlines in the 1940s. This particular locomotive in the 1940s was in service in Western North Carolina. That's some of the plants. But they had several lines through eastern North Carolina rating out from Wilmington. Basically, it's just like laying your hand down and where all your fingers would stick out would be where all the rail lines were. Matter of fact, for the city of Wilmington, of the 5 rail lines in about past the 1940s, 4 of them were Atlantic Coastline, 1 of them was Seaboard Airlines. But ironically, the only one remaining is the Seaboard connection from Hamlet. The locomotives like these were new on the Atlantic Coastline. They were dual service engines for both passenger and freight. The 1031 would have pulled passenger trains out of Wilmington, just like the sister that you see in Wilmington today, the 250. But most of what you see in the photographs surrounding the 1031 were for freight. The these can be found on lines running out of Wilmington, up to Newbern, Fayetteville, or down south to Florence, South Carolina, or Myrtle Beach. All right, once they get it chocked down, they'll pull the engine off and they'll start this one spinning around. Now by the 1950s, the Atlantic Coastline was replacing a lot of the steam locomotives with diesels and sending locomotives like this to some of their subsidiary lines. The 1031 went to 2 such lines in eastern North Carolina. The East Carolina Railway, which operated out of Greenville, and the Virginia and Carolina Southern, which was based out of Lumberton. They allowed this locomotive to continue to be in service until 1959. And in that year, this particular locomotive was chosen to be displayed at the railroad station in Florence, South Carolina. There it remained until 1994, when the locomotive was moved to our museum, cosmetically restored as you see it today, to put on display in the roundhouse. This is one of 2 surviving 10-wheelers from the Atlantic Coastline. As I mentioned earlier, the other one, the 250, is in Wilmington. Atlantic Coastline was also an early leader in diesel-powered passenger trains, mainly in response to the Seaboard. Exactly, the Seaboard came out in 1834 with the all-diesel-powered Orange Blossom Special. The Atlantic Coastline looked to create their own train, and in 1939, they started operating the Champion. Now, the interesting thing about this train is the railroad held a contest to name the train. And you could send in your ideas, and a lady from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania won the contest, and she was thinking of a boxing champion. But it was also interesting that the current vice president of passenger service for the Atlantic Coastline was named Champion McDowell Davis, who later became full president of the Atlantic Coastline. You can ride the current Amtrak train from New York to Florida, but still go across the same road that the Atlantic Coastline and the Seaboard used through the 1960s. It is now what is known as the Atlantic Coast Service of Amtrak. One interesting thing also about the Atlantic Coastline is when the diesel locomotives were first used, they were painted a combination of purple and silver. And we have a representative of that in the roundhouse today at the Atlantic Coastline 501. They continued to use those color schemes until the late 1950s, where they went to a black scheme, and some people call it a racing horse scheme of the ACL. We hope you're really enjoying your day at the North Carolina Transportation Museum, celebrating our Rail Days event and the 30th anniversary of Linwood Yard. We will continue to have Rail Days tomorrow as well from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The trains that were operating around the property, the power that we're using, we have the Norfolk and Western GP9, Southern Railway GP30, and on the passenger train, a combination of Southern Railway FP7 and the E8. The interesting thing about the Norfolk and Western GP9 is that they continue to use mainline steam power so long that by the time they had decided to dieselize, they had skipped a lot of the earliest forms of diesel locomotives.